the most tremendous new musical experience you can have.
Alright, what's up y'all? It's Logan, and I'm just going to come on here for a little bit of a fun video, starting with a little bit of an update. First off, I am not going to be doing a podcast this week. I'm thinking about cutting back on those, if not just completely not doing them at all, just because one, they don't get views, two, I don't really it doesn't add anything to the channel, in my opinion. Like, yes, I talk about what's coming out, but you can easily find that on Twitter, so it's not like anyone's coming here to find their news. And then just talk about what I'm listening to. So instead, I am planning on replacing that with what was once paired with that, my feature topic. I'll just do a feature topic, so that's what this is going to be here. So, what are we going to talk about this time for our first just feature topic video? How to classify classic albums. What is a classic album? What makes an album a classic? I feel like this is a very common discussion where many people try to argue that any album that's rated highly is a classic, and then other people try to argue that it has to have an extreme impact to be a classic. I lean more to the impact side than the rating side. Obviously, rating takes into effect, but that's not all, in my opinion. I think you have to look at the entire body of work. So take, for example, Straight Outta Compton by NWA. That is definitely agreed upon to be a classic. Not only is it a highly rated project, one of the best hip-hop projects of the 80s and of all time, but it's also super influential with amazing impact. Just look at the fact, one, it basically sparked the entire gangster rap. It started the gangster rap movement straight from the jump. After that album, that was extremely popularized to where that was basically the bulk of what was coming out in the 90s. And on top of that, just the statement that it made. I know rap had been around for a while, fighting against cops and injustice, but that was the first album to gain popularity that also blatantly spoke against that in an almost violent manner. Made a flat-out statement for that against police brutality and racism. So, of course, that album, no debate, is a classic. Not only because of its rating, but because it is extremely influential and it impacted not only rap, but the entire world. Most people know about that album that grew up around that time or were of the age, 15 to 30 at that time. Not only that, it got its own movie. It had outraged people. Even people who didn't enjoy rap music knew about it because they were outraged, smashing the records in the streets and stuff like that. Granted, that's not what you want to be known for, but that still has a huge impact, and it's a part of American history, not only hip-hop history, in my opinion. Now, that being said, that's an extreme example of what is an absolute classic. We go to something a little bit more modern day. We look at a, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, right? Is one of the highest rated albums ever. The impact, really, what is its impact? Of course, it's a Kanye album. It has a lot of great sample-based production, but it's not like that's the first album to ever do that. He had been doing that his entire career. It has a lot of great features. I think that's more its impact, that you can afford to have a solo album and have a lot of features. Granted, The Chronic did that way before, but to have that many big names to go off and seclude yourself and pay to fly people out, I think that's a huge thing. But just the amount of hits that produced, all of that, of course, everyone would agree that's an absolute classic. Probably a top 10, top 20 at least rap album ever. Definitely top 5 for the past decade, the 2010s. So yeah. However, like I said, ratings are not all that matter. Take, for example, one of my favorite albums, Taboo. I think that's a great album. I think that a lot of people would refer to it as a highly rated album. I personally have it as like a 9 out of 10, which I guarantee you there are albums with lower ratings that are considered classics. I think that it's a great album. But is it a classic? I don't think so. I don't think that it really does anything influential to the rap game. I don't think that it brings anything crazy new other than like being more dark. Of course, Denzel Curry is a unique artist. It follows a good storyline, but again, that's not anything that we have never heard before, and it has no impact on daily life. I don't think it has much of an impact on the future for hip hop. I don't think it created any new names. Of course, it brought Denzel Curry into more of a mainstream light. Still would not consider him mainstream at all, but it does bring him into more of that light. But is it a classic? Is it a classic? No, I do not believe so. So, is there a scientific, mathematical way to prove what a classic is and what a classic is not? No. Certainly not. There's no way to do that. But I think you do have to sit back and consider how highly is it rated first. If it's a 6 out of 10, it's probably not a classic. And you have to look at that objectively, of course, such as, I'm not the biggest fan of some rap songs, my apologies. But is it a highly rated album objectively? Yes, most people would say that it is a good album. Most people would have it as a 8, a 9, whatever, even if I'm not the biggest fan of it. Of course, I came around on it, but it's not one that I revisit. So re-listenability is not always the most important thing, such as To Pimp a Butterfly. That's not you don't sit through that and listen to that every single day, most likely. But it is the best rap album, the best album ever. I may be speaking out of pocket in saying that, but you all know my opinion on that regardless. So, again, rating matters, but it's not the end-all be-all. Impact at the same time matters, but it is not the end-all be-all. If it has a lot of impact, but it's not a good album, let's see. Not a great example of what I'm saying, but 808s and Heartbreaks. I think that is a really good album. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a really good album. Has a good rating. But is it a classic? That's debatable. I don't think it's a guaranteed classic, despite it having a lot of impact, opening the window for someone like Drake to come out. Yeah, I think it changed the course of hip-hop. But is it a classic? I don't know, because it's not one that a lot of people go back and listen to all the time. Of course, unless you're a huge Kanye fan like myself. And it's not really that highly rated altogether. Like, yeah, I think most people agree it's around that 8-ish range, 9. Some people would call it a 10. I think that's a stretch. But that one's debatable. I think that it's a potential classic. I think it can be definitely a personal classic. But is it a guaranteed classic? I don't think so. I think there's a debate to be had there. And I think that's where you have to come into almost a classification system for rap albums and if they're a classic or not. Like, you have your guaranteed classics, like To Pimp a Butterfly, Illmatic, Ready to Die, stuff like that. Of course, Straight Outta Compton, stuff like that. And then you have your absolute not classics, obviously. I don't even need to there. That is such a long list. Most albums are not classics, but you do have your absolute not classics, just like a random album that came out of nowhere, I'm not going to name any examples just to not annoy any fan bases. And then you have your borderline classics. Are they a classic? Are they not? Your 808s and Heartbreaks. Let's see. I would say you could put Damn in that category. A lot of people talk back and forth about that one. It has some impact, though. It has a good storyline. It's rated generally high, but I know a large group of people also consider it to be not that great. Albums like that, albums that fit that categorization. Let's see, Eminem, he has his run of 3 albums that you could call it classics, but then a lot of people could argue, are they actually classics? Stuff like that, to where there is a large faction of people who argue that they might not be. Now, of course, me personally, I would call Eminem's 3-album run classic. I don't think there's much of a debate to say that it isn't, just the impact that it had at the time. Even if it didn't change the course of hip-hop history, it did inspire a lot of artists rising, and they are, generally speaking, very highly rated. So yeah, I think you have to take the whole bulk of work into consideration. Just like whenever you talk about sports, say NBA players, Wilt Chamberlain has some of the most records of all time, but no one talks about him being the greatest of all time because he was a rather selfish player for the bulk of his career. He did not sacrifice for his own good to make the team better, and that's why he consistently lost to Bill Russell, who was one of the most selfless players and played for one of the best teams in history. Even despite the fact that a lot of times Wilt Chamberlain went in with the better overall team, including himself. They might have been favored for the series, but his stats a lot of the times mattered more. Russell Westbrook as a better example and more recent. His triple doubles, yes, are amazing. He's very capable of scoring, rebounding, and assisting as a point guard. A very great player, but does that lead to team success all the time? No. Is he a champion? No. Does he make a lot of boneheaded decisions? Absolutely. So you have to take the entire bulk of work into consideration. And I think that matters a lot whenever you're discussing if an album is a classic or not. So keep that in mind whenever you're discussing these things on hip hop Twitter, discussing these things with friends, because you can't just go out and say that every single album that you love is a classic. Like I said, I am one of the biggest Taboo fans, but it's not a classic. Also, you have to consider time frame. It's been 2 years since that one came out, so I couldn't, even if I thought it was going to go down as a classic, I could not say that it is. I think 5 years is generally speaking a good time. Granted, I've probably been calling To Pimp a Butterfly a classic since a week after it came out. But that album's just different. That does not come out all the time, and as a matter of fact, an album has not come out better than that since it's been released, and I don't think before it was released either, but regardless. I think 5 years is, generally speaking, a good time to wait to even begin the discussion. 10 years is usually whenever something can be cemented as a classic. But even then it can be debatable. So just keep that in mind throughout your discussions. If you have any points to raise about this, if you have anything that you think I missed, please leave that in the comment section. I kind of just went off the dome on this one. I didn't have any notes. I just wanted to talk about it because it's something that I've noticed a lot, and just wanted to broach the subject. So make sure to hit me up with your thoughts in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, hit the bell next to my name for notifications. Share this video so your friends can find out that their favorite album is not a classic, or maybe it is. Maybe there's a debate for it. Who knows? I appreciate y'all, and I will hit y'all up next time.